Hello, I'm Dr. Richard Harris, and welcome to Research Tuesday, where we go over some current research and we try to do it in 5 minutes or less. So, what are we talking about today? One of my favorite things, something I recommend that's in my wellness programs, and that is get some green space. Now, this study specifically looks at green space and cardiovascular disease in adults in China. So, what are they looking at? This study was looking at, well, what's the association between residential greenness and cardiometabolic disorders and cardiovascular disease in adults? So let's dive into what the study showed. So previous studies have shown that higher greenness was associated with lower risk of cardiometabolic disorders. That's hypertension, diabetes, obesity, these type of disorders. So if you're around green space, you tend to have less of these disorders. So some of the research showed that there was some mediation effect, that if you looked at cardiovascular disease and then you accounted for these other disorders, there was a lesser effect of green space, but we'll dive more into that in a minute. It is possible that we're seeing, people who are around green space are using that space more for health-like activities. But anyway, what did the study do? So it was really cool. They used satellite imagery to look at green space, use some really fancy light calculations to determine the amount of vegetation in certain areas. I thought that was pretty cool. I wish I got to play with satellites on a daily basis. But they also took a look at other confounders, meaning age, ethnicity, sex, household income, education, physical activity, and as well as air pollution, which I thought was a really cool thing to add in, because a lot of the data that we're starting to see now looks at air pollution, basically the level of particulate matter of a certain diameter or less, that fine particulate concentration in the air, which is being associated with a bunch of diseases. Okay, so what did the study find? So basically, the study found if you went from the 25th percentile of vegetation or green space to the 75th percentile of green space, there was a reduction of about 27% in cardiovascular disease. And that's a pretty significant amount. Now, it did find that those mediators that we talked about earlier, the hypertension, obesity, high cholesterol, diabetes, accounted for about 21% of that effect. So not 21% of the 23 of 27 I mentioned. So it wasn't just 6%, meaning that 21% of the 27% difference was mediated if you accounted for these conditions. So you're still seeing an association with green space and less cardiovascular disease. Now, this study corroborates what a lot of other studies have shown. One study showed that there was a reduction in coronary heart disease and stroke if you had a higher level of green space in China. Another study showed that the greater distance you were from green spaces showed an increased cardiovascular risk. Another study looked at people living under tree canopies, and they reported that areas with greater tree loss had an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So one of the things that the authors mentioned is it would be interesting to see a study looking at the precursors to cardiovascular disease, meaning those risk factors like diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia, and seeing if there's an association there with green space, which I think would be an interesting study. And I imagine that there would be an association there. So what's the take home from this? We always say get out in nature. There's plenty of reasons why being out in nature is good for us. Grounding, getting on Mother Earth, getting that beneficial EMF from the earth. Sunlight, vitamin D, very important. We're seeing that now with COVID. Vitamin D is made when sunlight hits our skin. Also serotonin. So we talk about vitamin D and what it does, sunlight, what it does for vitamin D. But not a lot of people know that serotonin, the happy neurotransmitter, the happy brain chemical, the calming one, is increased by sun exposure. And then at night, that serotonin, when the sun goes down, that production gets shut down. And then we turn that serotonin into melatonin to help us sleep. So it helps regulate our sleep-wake cycle, which also has numerous effects. So there's numerous reasons why being outside is important. You can socialize outside, physical activity. So these are just some of the reasons why being around green space would be beneficial to our health. The way we interact with the environment is so complex, and we're just scratching the surface on some of the research on this environmental interactions, like the importance of green space, because we didn't really need to study it before. It was just everywhere before. But now, as we're creating more and more concrete jungles and we're spending more and more time inside, we're seeing that type of lifestyle is not advantageous for our health. So key takeaway, get outside more, get in the park more, get your feet on Mother Earth. All right, if you want more of our lifestyle recommendations, you can check out our wellness courses at theghwellness.com. Click programs at the top. Thank you for watching Research Tuesday. We'll be back on Thursday with a study that's causing a lot of controversy right now about intermittent fasting. We'll break it down and give you my opinion on it. And thank you and God bless.